Cloud of suspicion surrounds the deaths of Oscar-winning actor Gene Hackman and his wife, whose bodies were found in their Santa Fe home. No one had seen the couple for days, and authorities say they had been dead for some time.
It includes details on what Betsy Hackman was searching for before she died and the first-person view of the officers.
Gene Hackman's laptop files shocked investigators. And the moment the FBI saw what was on that screen, they stopped treating this like a welfare check and started treating it like something else entirely.
Actor Gene Hackman, his wife, classical pianist Betsy Arakawa, and their dog were found dead inside their New Mexico home.
2 people dead in a locked estate. A laptop open on a desk inside a private library. Files on that device that nobody outside the investigation has been allowed to describe. Federal agents were called in, the search extended deep into the property, and then the silence came down so fast and so completely that not a single official has confirmed, denied, or explained what those files contained, or what else they found inside that house. The gates that wouldn't open. The handyman had been trying for days. Phone calls went unanswered, messages vanished. The household that had run with quiet, organized precision for years had simply gone dark, and nobody outside those walls could explain why. So, he made the call, and deputies drove out to check. The road into the estate wound, through a long stretch of dirt, cutting through the foothills of northern New Mexico.
Hackman will be remembered for so many performances in his career over 5 decades. He rose to stardom in the 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde.
Pinon and juniper trees pressed in on both sides, closing off sightlines so completely that the main house wasn't visible until you were nearly at the gate. Neighbors had long described the Hackman estate as one of the most private properties in the region. When deputies arrived at the perimeter, they found the gates locked. The estate had been designed to remain sealed unless someone inside deliberately opened it. Reinforced perimeter fencing, surveillance systems, controlled access gates monitored around the clock. Every lock was intentional. Deputies cut through anyway and stepped onto the grounds. No vehicles, no staff, no lights in the windows. The large residence stood completely still among the trees, undisturbed in a way that felt less like privacy and more like something had stopped for good. Officers made their way inside and found the bodies of Gene Hackman and his wife, Betsy Arakawa. Medical examiners determined that Arakawa, 65, had died first from a severe hantavirus infection. Hackman, 95, died days afterward from heart failure compounded by advanced Alzheimer's disease. Officials later confirmed that his Alzheimer's was so severe he had survived. Survived might be the better word. For approximately a week inside that home with his wife's body before he also passed.
Hackman was 95 years old. We've seen a lot of tributes since the news of his passing.
Neither death showed signs of violence. On paper, it looked like tragedy. But the investigation didn't stop there. Here is where it starts to get strange. When authorities began the forensic sweep of the property, one of the first things they found was a laptop, sitting open on the desk inside Hackman's private library. They didn't know yet what was on it. They didn't know yet what the library was hiding. But they flagged the device immediately, and whatever they found on that screen is the reason this case stopped being routine before the first day was over. The gates were locked, the house was silent, and what was waiting inside had been waiting for a very long time. If you need to step away, don't, because where this goes next is not something you want to miss. Subscribe now so you're here for every chapter of this. The Room. He never left. After retiring from acting in 2004, Gene Hackman devoted himself almost entirely to writing historical fiction, thrillers that drew heavily on his obsession with American history, military strategy, and classified government programs. Friends who visited the estate in earlier years consistently described his private library as the center of the house, the room where he spent most of his waking hours. It made the library the first place investigators went. The room looked ordinary at first. Tall bookshelves lining every wall, antique furniture under warm light, rare volumes carefully arranged alongside framed artwork and scattered manuscripts. First editions sat next to heavily annotated research materials, but tucked inside a copy of a Cold War infrastructure history, spine cracked from repeated use, was a page of handwritten margin notes so dense they covered every available inch of white space. Names, Dates. A series of question marks circled 3 times beside a reference to underground installations in northern New Mexico, and beneath them, in Hackman's tight, careful handwriting, one word underlined twice. Confirmed? That detail mattered more than investigators knew at the time. Here is what they noticed when they started moving carefully through the space. Books had been removed and replaced out of order. A heavy chair showed fresh drag marks across the hardwood floor. Several drawers were partially open in a way that suggested someone had searched the contents in a hurry and hadn't bothered to close them. The dust patterns on certain shelves were uneven. Someone had been working in this room recently, and they hadn't been careful about it. Then they looked at the laptop, this browser history, the folder structure, the documents left open on the desktop. Whatever Hackman had been researching in the weeks before his death was specific, organized, and deep. Investigators began cross-referencing what they were seeing on screen with the subjects filling the shelves around them.
It's not uncommon to find someone down on the floor as part of a terminal collapse, so to speak, and that may very well have been what happened.
Cold War construction, underground installations in northern New Mexico, classified federal programs from the mid-20th century. The research didn't look like background material for a novel. It looked like someone trying to confirm something they had already found. And that is when one of the agents noticed the wall that moved. The wooden paneling behind a section of bookshelves didn't sit flush with the surrounding frame, a small inconsistency. The kind of thing you'd walk past 1,000 times without registering, but once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. A closer look revealed a concealed mechanical trigger built directly into the wooden frame. A small activation, point hidden behind a row of books at exactly the height of a seated man's hand. When investigators activated it, a section of the wall shifted inward with precise mechanical smoothness. A hidden panel opened quietly into darkness. Let that land for a second. Behind a bookshelf in Gene Hackman's private library, a room that looked, at a glance, like nothing more than the well-stocked study of a prolific novelist, there was a door. Not a door someone improvised. A precision-engineered concealment mechanism built directly into the architectural frame of the house. Not a padlock, not plywood. Something permanent, something deliberate, something that had been there a very long time. Behind it was a narrow stone staircase descending into the earth. Nobody on the team had any idea what was waiting at the bottom, what the tunnel remembered. The staircase dropped deeper with every step. The air changed fast, cooler, heavier, carrying the faint metallic smell of rust and the kind of dampness that only builds up in stone that hasn't seen daylight in decades. Flashlight beams swept across rough surfaces, revealing walls that looked untouched for most of the 20th century. Here is the thing about this tunnel. It didn't look like one thing. It looked like several different projects built on top of each other across different generations. The upper sections showed deliberate modernization, concrete supports, steel braces, electrical conduit lines partially embedded into the walls, as if someone had started the process of running power into the passage and then stopped halfway through. But deeper in, the material changed completely. The lower stonework was hand-cut. Traditional chisel marks, not machinery. Uneven joints between stone blocks. The kind of irregular craftsmanship associated with early 20th century excavation, rather than anything built after World War II. Engineers who later examined photographs of the tunnel structure concluded that the lower sections were likely built decades before the house above them, possibly as early as the first quarter of the 1900s. The tunnel beneath Gene Hackman's library may have already existed when he moved in.
She had died first, and that Gene Hackman was in the house alone for a week or so, and that his Alzheimer's means it is very unclear as to how much he would have known as to what was going on.
Someone else built it. Someone else reinforced it. Someone else concealed the entrance inside the walls of what would eventually become his private study. And at some point, between then and now, someone made sure there was a very detailed record of what all of that meant, sitting open on the desk directly above. But the lower sections of this tunnel didn't look like a food cellar or a storm shelter. They looked like the beginning of something built for a different purpose entirely, something that continued somewhere else. The staircase didn't end at a dead wall, it ended in a room. And what was inside that room is why federal investigators were still on the property days after the deaths had already been explained. The underground archive. The chamber at the base of the tunnel looked less like storage and more like a place where information had been deliberately buried. Old wooden crates lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Some had collapsed under their own weight, spilling their contents across the stone floor in piles that had accumulated their own layer of dust. Others remained sealed, lids warped with age but still intact. The room had the quality of a place organized once with real purpose and precision, and then sealed off and left alone. Inside the crates, investigators found documents, photographs, and metal instruments spanning what appeared to be multiple decades. Several photographs were identified as dating to the early 20th century. Groups of men gathered around tables covered in maps and technical drawings, formal clothing, dark suits, heavy coats, placing the meeting somewhere in the 1920s and 1930s. In several images, the men were studying what looked like architectural layouts or engineering plans. One photograph carried a handwritten date in the corner, 1937. The documents were harder to read, but more unsettling. Many were written in fading ink on paper that had gone brittle with age. Others were carbon copies from government-issued typewriters. Several pages contained coded notations alongside partial lists of names and descriptions of events that didn't appear anywhere in accessible public records. Some pages had been partially burned, edges charred and fragile, suggesting someone had once tried to destroy the contents of this room and then abandoned the effort before finishing. Whatever they were trying to erase, they never completed it. Scattered among the papers were metal instruments, drafting compasses, measuring tools, small mechanical components resembling parts from early surveying equipment, the kind used by government-affiliated engineers documenting infrastructure projects across New Mexico during periods of rapid classified development. Here is what stopped investigators cold. Among the documents, several pages were written in personal shorthand, a system of abbreviated symbols and partial words that wasn't standard government cipher, but something closer to a private code. Someone had developed their own method of recording information in a way that would be meaningless to anyone not trained to read it. Tucked inside one of the sealed crates, separated from all other materials and wrapped in oilcloth that had preserved it in significantly better condition than anything else in the room, investigators found a single manila folder. Its contents have not been publicly disclosed. What has been confirmed is that it was removed from the property separately from all other archival materials and transported directly to a federal facility for examination. That folder is one of the things the FBI has not discussed publicly since. Now, here is what nobody on that team was prepared for. Because none of those documents, photographs, instruments, or even that sealed folder drew investigators' attention the way the structure at the far end of the chamber did. At the back of the room, embedded directly into the stone wall, was an iron door, and it had been locked from the wrong side. The door locked from inside. The iron door did not belong to the same era as the tunnel around it. Its steel construction was consistent with reinforced vault doors installed in secure government facilities during the mid-20th century. Thick metal plating, large riveted hinges anchored directly into the surrounding stone with industrial permanence. Even after years underground in a damp, low-oxygen environment, the door was structurally intact, built with a level of durability that had no business being in a private residential property. Here is the detail that stopped the room cold. The locking mechanism faced outward toward the chamber. The door had been secured from the other side. Whoever locked it wasn't in the room. Investigators were standing in. They were inside whatever existed beyond that door, in a space no one on that team had yet seen. In a space that, as of this recording, authorities have never publicly confirmed or described. The steel surface carried faint machining marks. The door had been fabricated in an industrial facility, not crafted by hand. Its thickness and reinforcement pattern matched vault-style doors used in mid-20th century secure installations, built to protect classified archives or specialized equipment from both forced entry and environmental damage. The hinges were mounted on the interior side, a design feature found almost exclusively in bunker construction, where doors are meant to withstand outward pressure. Along the edges of the frame, investigators found traces of heavy rubber sealing material, the kind installed specifically in airtight environments. Someone built this door to protect whatever was on the other side, and whoever locked it last was standing inside when they did. That is not the part that should bother you most. The part that should bother you is what it implies about the laptop, sitting open on the desk in the library directly above, and the research files on that screen pointing straight down to this room. The shadow of Los Alamos. Northern New Mexico is not ordinary American countryside. Less than an hour's drive from the Hackman estate sits Los Alamos. In the early 1940s, the United States government transformed that remote mountain region into the operational center of the Manhattan Project. Scientists, engineers, and military personnel arrived in secrecy. Entire communities were relocated. Roads were restricted and removed from public maps. The area was placed under the most intense security apparatus in American history as the country raced to develop nuclear weapons. After the war ended, the secrecy didn't lift. It evolved. Throughout the Cold War, northern New Mexico became home to an expanding network of classified laboratories, research facilities, and underground installations. Los Alamos National Laboratory grew steadily, conducting advanced work in physics, weapons engineering, and national security programs that stayed classified for decades. Government records released much later confirmed that extensive subterranean construction took place across the region. Reinforced bunkers, underground laboratories, and protected storage areas carved directly into the mesa and mountain rock. Some of those facilities were eventually dismantled, others were sealed, some simply faded from active documentation as programs changed. Here's the question investigators have never publicly addressed. What if the tunnel beneath the Hackman estate didn't begin as a private construction project? What if it was originally built during the years when northern New Mexico was the most classified piece of real estate on the planet? It would explain why the oldest tunnel sections look like a secure government installation rather than a residential basement. It would explain the vault door built to mid-century federal specifications. It would explain why the entrance was concealed with a precision-engineered mechanism built directly into the architectural frame of the house. And it would explain why, when federal agents opened that laptop, they didn't close the case. They called in federal resources, extended the search deep into the property, and then went completely silent. What was on the laptop? Here is what we know. When the FBI accessed the device on Hackman's library desk, what they found prompted federal involvement at a level that goes well beyond a natural death inquiry. Dr. James Whitfield, a retired archivist at the National Archives facility in College Park, Maryland, who reviewed case documentation in a consulting capacity and later spoke with a journalist covering the investigation, described his reaction in plain terms. Whoever built this research file knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't curiosity. This was confirmation. The folder structure on the device contained organized research files covering subjects that aligned precisely with the historical period represented by the documents in the chamber below. Scanned photographs, typed summaries, cross-reference timelines, correspondence with historians, archivists, and at least one individual connected to a federal records facility. The kind of methodical, sustained work that takes months of effort and a clear sense of what you are specifically looking for. Now think back to the library above that tunnel. Think about the copy of that Cold War infrastructure history. Spine cracked from use, margins filled with Hackman's tight handwriting. A word underlined twice in ink, confirmed. That wasn't a novelist's annotation. That was a researcher closing in on something he had already half found. Hundreds of annotated volumes on American history, military, strategy, Cold War infrastructure, and government secrecy programs. Margin annotations stretching across entire pages, handwritten notes tucked between pages. This was not the research shelf of a novelist hunting for color and atmosphere. This was a working investigation, conducted over years, in the room directly above a hidden passage, by a man with access to networks and sources that most people wouldn't even know how to reach. He was assembling something, building a timeline, trying to confirm what he had found beneath the floor of his own home. And in the weeks before his death, Hackman had gone quiet in a way that was different from his usual privacy. No outgoing calls, no scheduled visitors, no activity visible from the road. The household that had operated with organized consistency for years went completely silent. That shift, in a man who had already built an entire life around controlled isolation, carries a completely different weight when placed against what investigators found in that library: the laptop, the concealed passage, the underground archive, the door locked from the inside, the federal response to 2 deaths officially attributed to natural causes. That is not a retirement. That is a project. What remains sealed? No official statement has addressed the full scope of what was found beneath the Hackman property. The contents of the underground archive have not been cataloged publicly. The iron door has not been mentioned in any press conference. The connection between the laptop files and the chamber below the library has never been formally confirmed or denied. Journalists who sought clarification were redirected to statements addressing only the confirmed causes of death, leaving every question about the property without a public answer. That silence is its own kind of information. Investigations that conclude cleanly get wrapped up and released. What they don't do is involve federal agencies, extended forensic, sweeps, and the quiet removal of materials from an underground chamber that wasn't supposed to exist. The absence of any official explanation for the tunnel, the archive, the vault door, and the laptop files suggests that whatever was found is either still being processed or has entered a level of classification that makes public disclosure unlikely now or ever. The tunnel beneath that library was built by someone, reinforced by someone else, hidden inside the walls of the house by someone after that. Preserved through decades of ownership, changes until the morning, unanswered calls brought deputies to a locked gate on a cold February morning in 2025. Hackman may have been the first owner who actually understood what was down there. No one outside the investigation can say whether he found the passage and worked backward from what it contained, or built his entire Santa Fe life around investigating it from the start. What is clear is that by the time his body was found, the man in that house had been asking very serious questions about what lay beneath it for a very long time. And whatever answers he found are sitting in files on a laptop the FBI has not publicly discussed since the day they walked out of that library. Somewhere beyond that iron door, locked from the inside, built to government vault specifications, sealed inside a chamber beneath a dead man's private library, there is a room that has been waiting a long time to be opened. Subscribe now, because the day it is opened, you need to already be here.